What's up and what's happening, TPE family? We're back with another episode of the Pivot Experience podcast, where our aim and goal is to help leaders get better each and every week. I'm excited about this episode. Anytime I get a chance to talk to somebody who is in the field of coaching, who is in the field of helping leaders get better, I get excited because it's a moment where iron can sharpen iron. We all can stand to have those instances where we are challenged in thought and we are challenged to be able to continue to grow ourselves and push ourselves. In this episode, I have the pleasure of interviewing Peter Lopez III, the founder and owner of Elevated Leadership Coaching. Peter resides in Phoenix, Arizona, and he is currently working for the world's most caring brand, and he also does leadership coaching. I'm excited for you guys to participate in this conversation. I know I enjoyed the conversation with Peter, and I'm sure you will too. Let's enjoy the episode. Where's my love, What's up and what's happening, TPE family? We're back with another episode of the Pivot Experience podcast, where our goal and aim is to help leaders get better each and every week. As you guys know, I love bringing on guests that I feel like is going to add value to our lives and add value to my life. And one of our guiding principles, just on a personal level, is iron sharpening iron. I'm never afraid to really have a conversation with someone who I feel like is either in the same space or in the same field that I am. I do believe that I believe in an abundance mindset. I believe someone told me at work that the sun shines on us all. And so I'm not afraid to ever interact with people who I feel like are doing the same thing as me, because I'm a lifelong student. I always want to learn. I always want to engage. I always want to interact. And I met this gentleman on LinkedIn. You know, as you guys know, I've been networking hard on LinkedIn, and I came across some of his content, and I saw that he was working at Chick-fil-A. One box checked. He was a leadership coach, another box checked. And he was putting out some great content, which I think that, you know, we put out decent content here at TPE. So I just had to I had to connect with him. And he was gracious enough to accept the invitation to come on to the show. I am talking about a man by the name of Peter Lopez. Peter, how are you doing today?
Hey, doing good, Alex. Hey, that's love your intro. Really excited to be a part of this. I want to say hello to the TPE community, and I'm just really thankful that you've given me the opportunity to be here, man. I love your attitude, love your spirit. I think that's brought you to where you are now, and I'm just really looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Likewise, likewise. And so I know you're in the world of coaching, and I know you're in the world of Chick-fil-A, but you mentioned something before we talked. Right now, without giving up too much information, you're in Arizona, right? But you said you were a
Mhm.
Texan. So I want to hear a little bit about what that transition looked like. You know, give us a little, you know, if you can give us a snapshot of what your life has been, so that people can know,
Yeah.
know a little bit more about you.
Absolutely, man. So I did. I grew up in the southern tip of Texas, commonly known as the Rio Grande Valley. And so that's where I grew up, went to, that's where all the way through high school. A small area of the world, man. Everything else in the country seems like it might as well be a different country. Like we are so far south. So when I was looking to go to college, I wanted to expand. I wanted to experience something different. So I left South Texas when I was about 18, 19 years old. And I went to Indianapolis, Indiana. And that's where I decided I was going to go to a school there. I was going to get my bachelor's degree. And I did. Just so happened that when I arrived in Indianapolis, Indiana, I met a girl. She ended up being the one that I married. She was from the Indiana area. So the next 15 years of my life, which is where my kids were born, were spent in the Midwest, opened me up to an entirely different culture. Loved it, loved the kindness, the hospitality, and generosity. And then the last 7 years, our career brought us to Phoenix, Arizona. And that's where I've been now. Again, a completely different culture than the Midwest and slightly different than Texas, but just close enough that it makes me feel at home in this area. But yet it has this super cool Southwest flair to it. So that's kind of my life in a little bit of a nutshell.
Okay, no, cool. I off the cuff, I know one thing we share is it's probably hot. It's hot where you're at. It's hot where I'm at. For sure. I
It
mean,
is.
without going into too much detail, I know that's probably one thing we share in common. So just getting into our conversation here, can you share like what has gotten you to your career at Chick-fil-A? Like what brought you to working at Chick-fil-A, and then what has ultimately brought you to your coaching company? If you would introduce your coaching company, what what your manifesto is, and everything else.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, Alex. So yeah, I have been like all of my life, I've been like a student of leadership. I mean, even starting off as a middle school, high school athlete, I was always intrigued by leaders. I was intrigued by those who were able to bring people together and accomplish something great. Right, as an athlete, that was what intrigued me. And so I've always been someone who either watched videos or who did all the reading that I possibly could. I've just really been a student of leadership pretty much most of my life and have been able to be fortunate enough to be in career positions that have enabled me to be practicing leadership like 365 days a year. I mean, I'm constantly practicing, implementing, shifting, learning, adjusting, all of the things that leadership requires. The biggest transition point came really around COVID. I feel like when COVID happened in our country, it put an extreme pressure on leaders no matter what industry you were in or what like sales, what market you were in. It put pressure on leaders, and I started to realize then that leaders were it's either you were being highlighted as someone who is really leading, or you were finding yourself falling short because some of your leadership skills may have just been a little bit underdeveloped. But I felt like leadership was so important during that time. That's really when my mind started thinking like we all need to be students of leadership, and anyone in any kind of leadership position should constantly be challenging themselves to develop. So shortly after COVID is actually when I transitioned to a company that I was in for a very short period of time and experienced what I would consider a terrible leadership culture. I mean, it was one of those settings that I'm like, this is what it's like to be under poor leadership. And at that time, a Chick-fil-A operator from our town kind of engaged me and asked me if I'd be willing to come over to Chick-fil-A and help build kind of the leadership team and leadership structure and some of the operational systems of Chick-fil-A. Of course, I'm like, I think that sounds great to me, right? Like, because from what I knew about Chick Fil A as a lifelong, basically fan of Chick Fil A, I'm like, I am all over that. So that's really when I transitioned to Chick Fil A. As I got into Chick Fil A, really, I began as like an executive of operations. So I'm in charge of all the operational elements. Shortly thereafter, I transitioned and I was the executive director of people and culture and development. And I realized that that was really what was maximizing my personal skill sets. And I saw the impact, honestly, it was having on all of the leaders in our restaurant. It's being able to visually see the impact that leadership development and really strategic investment in leaders was having, which made me approach my operator and say, what do you think about me taking this and starting my own leadership development company called Elevated Leadership Group, where I can work with business owners and senior to mid-level leaders across other Chick-fil-A's, across other restaurants, even industries, and help them see the same type of experience that we've been able to. And there you go. That was the birth, the launch of Elevated Leadership Group. So today, I'm the executive director of people at Chick-fil-A, loving it, enjoying those that I get to work with, and then also the executive of Elevated Leadership Group, executive leadership coach. So yeah, that's a little bit of my journey, man.
No, I love that. Truett said we're not in the chicken business, but we're in the people business. And
Absolutely.
there's a real internal tug. We're gonna talk Chick-fil-A here a little bit, but there's a real
Yeah.
internal tug between the director of people and the director of operations. Typically, like,
Mhm.
which one's
Mhm.
more important? Did the chicken come first or the egg, right? Which one do we
Yeah.
prioritize? But I definitely feel like, kudos to your restaurant for investing specifically in people, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Kudos to you, for accepting that, because we can be the fastest, we can have the greatest product, but as we talked about off cam, the culture is really what drives,
Yeah.
the work environment, and really what drives the business. And so, being in a position to impact that is awesome. What are
Mhm.
some what are some unique leadership challenges that you've observed in the Chick-fil-A, your Chick-fil-A organization, and how are you addressing them?
Yeah, I would say some of the unique challenges, maybe just a couple or three that I've noticed, are honestly just the need for leaders. We still have right now leadership gaps, positions that we want to fill. We have a bench of people. We're fairly new to our restaurant. We just took the leadership over of our restaurant about 2 years ago, and so we're still in that process of remaking the culture. We had been in a previous location, and so, but we have some gaps we need to fill. And what I find is sometimes really the tendency to want to move a little too fast and maybe put people into a leadership position that aren't necessarily fully prepared for that position. They do fantastic where they're at. So you want to quickly move them forward, but there is a significant risk by putting someone in a position before they're ready. I think that's one of the challenges that I've noticed in our context, in our setting. Another one is just honestly the pace. Chick-fil-A is a very fast-paced machine. I tell when we hire leaders, I say it's like a train that's like a bullet train. We're going hundreds of miles per hour, but we're going to find a good way to get you on it, right? But it is very fast-paced, and in a fast-paced environment, leadership can often be overlooked. You can plug the piece in and then just let it go when you have to invest strategically and specifically and in a fast-paced environment. Sometimes you can, if you're not being very deliberate, you can overlook certain leadership pieces, which basically is ultimately it's going to hurt you. You're going to find some gaps that are being present. You're going to find an undertone of frustration and negativity. So I think those are a couple of that I've noticed. And then honestly, what you mentioned, man, the tug, there's this constant tension between like the elements of culture and people and the need for profit, right? And the need to make money and to sell so you can keep the people around and keep the people on the payroll. There's this constant tension between the two, and it's really finding the right balance between in that tension. I have a very specific thought about it on my end from my perspective, but I do think those are some of the challenges, at least three of the challenges that I find that we face.
And I think to speak to one of those, you mentioned pace, and this is where I feel like I have to check myself as a leader because I came up in the
Mhm.
luxury. I started 20 years ago. Chick-fil-A, from a volume standpoint, was a lot different. So we were,
Mm,
developing a lot of the things that we see now that are common, and so I have to be careful as a leader to not like put my expectations on someone who didn't have the luxury of kind of growing with the volume. I tell
absolutely,
people now, and
absolutely.
I try to get our leaders to understand now. It's like, hey, you grew with this. We're throwing
Mm,
people in to the mix of
mm,
the chaos. We kind of remember when we had those moments where it was slow or there was nothing going on. Now
yeah.
people. So I think that's a very valid stance because I think I try to, from a recruitment standpoint or more so a
Mhm.
retention standpoint, I tell people the culture that we create for the level of work we're doing, somebody else can maybe go somewhere else and do 90% less work,
Yes. Mhm.
for comparable income. It's all about the environment
Absolutely.
that you create.
Mhm.
It's all about the
Mhm.
culture that you create. And I think that kind of brings me
Mhm.
into my next question. It's like, how does the culture of Chick-fil-A, right? You're relatively new to the culture. But
Absolutely.
I think internally you represented what Chick-fil-A represented, but just in terms of like the
Mhm.
Chick-fil-A language and how we do it, how has that
Mhm.
culture influenced your approach to leadership development and coaching?
Yeah, I mean, you said it right. Like you led into it. I was going to say the culture of Chick-fil-A, I find aligns like wonderfully with my personal approach to leadership and even to business. It aligns so well that there hasn't been a need to make these massive adjustments so that I could fit the culture. There was really great alignment with it. I like the people. You referenced Truett's quote, right? Like we sell chicken, yeah, but we are in the people business, and I like that approach. That's very important to me. That's why leadership development is so important. And at the same time, that's what I like teaching our leaders of how the people are the ones that drive the business. I like the service element of Chick-fil-A's culture. It's service. I think it does lean towards that that service type leadership. And that's exactly that aligns with me, and that's what the development that I teach is. And but also, honestly, Chick-fil-A has a desire and a passion for excellence. I mean, Chick-fil-A doesn't want to settle for anything less than the best, and I like that. And sometimes I think leadership development tends to leave that element out of it. It tends to lean heavily towards people and service, but it's also about all of us together being amazing and being great. And I like that passion, that pursuit of excellence, because it really does fit with me. So all of my leadership development that I bring into the restaurant or that I bring in through my business is all aligned with those things. It's people, it's service, and it's excellence. So it really aligns great with where Chick-fil-A is at as a company.
That's awesome. What are some key qualities? And I'll ask you this from a Chick fil A perspective, and you can answer
Yeah.
this also from the elevated leadership perspective. But what are some key qualities that you feel like leaders need to have to be successful in today's economy?
Yeah, that's a good question, Alex. I honestly I think it's care. I would put really care at the top. I think that really came out during that COVID time. I think pre-COVID there was an element of the workplace where care wasn't seeming to be necessary. It's just, look, I pay you to do the job, do it, right? But through COVID and then after we've come out of COVID, the workforce really requires care. They want to be cared for, and if they're not, they're either going to work below what their performance capabilities are, or honestly, they're not going to stay long, which ultimately is going to hurt your retention. It's going to hurt your customer service. It's going to hurt everything you want in business. So I honestly put care at the top. An important quality of a leader is you have to genuinely care for the people that you're leading. It's so important, and care about what you're doing. And then I would put at the top too, and another quality is authenticity. I think that's again an element that the workforce is really demands right now. They want leaders who are authentic, willing to be transparent enough to get to know them and in a personal way, and yet willing to admit when they need help, all right, or willing to admit when I'm wrong, like just to say, look, that's my bad. I initiated that. It didn't go like I thought it was. I'm going to own up to that. And we're going to make some just authentic leadership. I think people want that. Perfection sounds amazing, but it's not going to be possible. So I think authenticity is what people want. I think another quality is honestly consistency. I think people they want to trust you, but if you're inconsistent, they can't. You have to be consistent in your attitude. You have to be consistent in your presence. I think you have to be consistent in your actions in order to be able to build that confidence and that trust that leadership ultimately requires. And I would even throw activity in there, man. And we're Chick-fil-A people, right? So we're expected to smile all the time and say my pleasure. And that's that positivity that I think draws customers. It does, but that's the positivity that also draws really great team members and employees and other leaders to us. It's positivity. And yeah, in a fast-paced environment like Chick-fil-A, there are a ton of frustrations that you're constantly going to face, but choosing positivity, I do think, is a quality that will draw other positive to people to you, and ultimately create an environment that really gets some pretty good things done. So I don't know. I'd say those are probably four of the top qualities. I would say, look, these are essential if you want to be amazing as a Chick-fil-A leader.
So I'm gonna go a little against the grain a little bit here, and I hope
Yeah,
this is okay with you. I think
yeah.
so. I want to talk about the first attribute, the care piece. I remember when Chick Fil A, came out and said they want to be the world's most caring company, and I see a lot of business leaders talk about care. But how do you articulate care to your team in a way that doesn't steer them away from accountability? I guess the question would be,
Mhm.
how does accountability and care exist together?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I think, and this is where we alluded to this in a previous conversation or here earlier. I think when people often talk leadership, they tend, especially when I talk my philosophy of leadership and I say care, often people tend to exclude it to like these really like fuzzy feelings of everybody's happy and smiling all the time. When I reference care, I'm talking about genuinely caring for the individuals who are around me, whether they're leaders of multiple levels or whether they're team members, genuinely caring for them. And in genuinely caring for them, what you do is you want the best for them. You desire for to bring everything out of them that is within them, that is really going to help them be successful, and to help them even identify weaknesses that are present within them so that they can sharpen and improve those. If I care for people, I am honestly going to do everything that I can to bring the best out of those people. And that automatically comes with a very high level of personal accountability. Except the fact that I care gives me an angle that if someone approached it from a position of not caring, they would probably really create the opposite effect of what they're wanting to within that person. When my angle, my view, my approach is really going to draw those people to me, it's going to open them up to my feedback, to my accountability, and it's going to give them a greater passion to rise to the expectations that maybe they didn't even have for themselves, but I genuinely believe they can arise too. And it's really going to help them elevate. I hope that clarifies maybe a little bit of what I mean by care. Right? Is that more clear?
No, I honestly, it was a bit rhetorical on my end because I knew what you were aiming at, but I know a portion of this audience is are younger leaders, and I think sometimes when they hear the word care, you immediately default to the warm and fuzzy piece of it. Caring, and I guess you can almost use the word love in synonymous with
Mhm.
this. Like if you really love
Mhm.
a person, you tell them when they're right or wrong. You
Yeah,
don't really you're not really caring for a person when you don't when you're not honest with them about their performance and you're sugarcoating certain things. You're not, that's almost more manipulative than caring. You know what I
it
mean?
is.
And so no, I just wanted to, for the audience sake,
I love it.
I didn't want them to hear you say, well, I should go home, I should go to work and be kinder. It's like and
Yeah,
of course you should be kind. Kindness is a key attribute. You said that
absolutely.
positivity is a good piece of it, and and don't be lost in this. You can be positive and kind and hold people accountable
Yeah, 100%.
simultaneously. And so I just wanted to clarify that a bit just for the people who are listening.
I'm
What
glad. No, thanks, Alex, because I do not want to give that impression. A
yeah.
bunch of people walking around smiling, thinking, "Hey, I'm a good leader now." No,
Yeah, yeah.
the care is a
While the
little
house
more
is
serious.
burning down, it's like, hey, we're happy. No. There's some things that need to be cleaned up here that we need to take care of.
Yeah, absolutely.
What advice would you give to aspiring leaders at Chick-fil-A or any other organization to help them make a significant impact?
Yeah, I would honestly say one of the first things I think is important for leaders, identify your purpose. Like why? What's your why? Why is it that you want to be a leader? Why is it that you want that promotion or that next level position? What is your why? And the reason why I think you need to identify that first is because if you don't really get it right early on, you're probably going to create more challenges for yourself along the way, and at some point, you're going to probably arrive at this crisis moment and you're going to have to identify your why at that point. So it's really going to save you some time, some energy, some effort to just stop, learn yourself well enough to identify why do I want to be a leader? Why do I want that position? And then once you've established that, you can start kind of moving in that direction. I think you'll actually move with more clarity. I honestly, mentors have been a big part of my life. I would say that'd be another thing. Seek a mentor out, and that's actually one of the questions that we ask when we interview for our leadership positions right now. Like when I have an interview for a potential candidate, I'm asking, "Can you tell me about a mentor that you have right now?" I want people who are going to seek out mentors, and I think that's an important element of someone who's an aspiring leader. Find someone who represents qualities that you want, that you desire, you aspire to. And then honestly, like don't wait for them to come to you. You go to them. You ask them if they'll sit down with you for a few minutes, and you ask them just two or three questions. You ask them to give you feedback from things they've observed. Like seek it out. Don't just wait for a mentor to choose you. I'd also say learning. You and I have both talked about that, right? We've been lifelong learners. We think learning is important. I'd say learning is important in any way. And then I always tell people, like, if you aspire to be a leader, then lead where you're at right now. Remember that leadership is not confined to a title. Leadership is more associated with influence and with the ability that you have to be able to influence those around you to create something. And you can do that even if you have no title whatsoever. So start your leadership journey right there where you're at. That's kind of what some of the things I would say are important for someone who aspires to be a leader. And I'll even tell people in our restaurant who want to move up to lead from your current position and think like you're in the next position. So that way, the decisions that you're already making and the way you're already starting to see the business, the way you're starting to see the movement of what's happening around you is already at the level above you. And that's what's going to help you stand out when those internal hiring process have been initiated and they're looking for someone to fill a role, or you're going to stand out because you may be one of the only ones that's already thinking like you're already in that role. So those are some of the piece of advice I would give to aspiring leaders.
And I think that rolls us into the next question, because I think you kind of answered some of it already. But what are some
Mhm.
of the metrics, or what are some of the things you use to measure whether or not a leader is performing well or they're advancing at the rate that we like them to go? What are some of those indicators for you?
Yeah, for me, I have a few. I use here. I implement like 360 reviews, and even will provide an element of that through elevated leadership group. Even if I'm working with leaders in other businesses, I think it is good to hear what the people who are experiencing your leadership, what are they experiencing it like. Their perception is often the leader's reality, and so 360 reviews are a way for me to be able to quantify the leadership impact of a person in a very strategic position. One of the things I sometimes get frustrated is in business, like Chick-fil-A, we can have metrics for so much. How the customer satisfaction, the speed of service, the cleanliness, and we just metrics for everything. But when it comes to leadership, it oftentimes ends up so subjectively based on emotions. I feel like you're doing great, or I feel like I saw you make a good decision. So what I've tried to do is create a review system that enables them to get legitimate, um, objective data, so that I can then sit with them and say, which I can now. Our goal is that you would be at 81% on this specific leadership area, and right now you're at 83%. Great job, like you're doing well. We can put a subjective a figure, so to speak, on our leaders. So 81% is what we expect for all of our leaders, and that's a way for every leader in our organization to know, okay, I am meeting or exceeding the expectations. So that's important for me. Another metric that's important to me is whenever we put out those reviews, we have internal. I know Chick-fil-A has their surveys, but we have internal surveys as well, and I want to make sure that I'm keeping an eye on the percentage of people that say they're recommending to work at Chick-fil-A. For me, if they're recommending to work at Chick-fil-A, it's because the leaders create an environment that makes them want to work there. So that's a metric I follow. Employee retention rate is a metric that I follow as well. If workers are happy with the culture and with the leader, they will stay. And then I'm also looking at OSAT that Chick-fil-A provides. I feel like if our leaders are leading well, that the guests are going to be getting an amazing experience. So I look at our OSAT numbers that our leaders are actually kind of producing during their shifts, and I'll say, hey, if you're leading a great team and creating a great culture, the business is going to experience it. So I do use the OSAT number as well. So those are some of the main metrics that I give to our leaders and say, this is how we know the effectiveness, and this is how we can measure your leadership journey.
Awesome. No, I love the objectivity that you're trying to create.
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
one of the hardest things to do when you're talking about people performance. It's
yeah.
always intuition, I'm guilty of that.
Mm-hmm.
On my working genius, it's one of my working genius is discernment. So a lot of my A lot of
Mm.
my decisions are kind of built off of an intuition, but I would rather it be systematic to where you can go, hey, definitively, this is where your gaps are. This
Yes,
is where you
absolutely.
excel at. This is where you have opportunities to grow. So I love that you're implementing that. So
Yeah,
Peter,
absolutely.
go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you. No, you go. You're good.
No, so I'm gonna kind of just close this up here. But what is
Yeah.
next for Peter? Like, what's next for you? Like, I know we got Chick-fil-A is in the scope. I know elevated leadership is in the scope. What is next
Yeah.
for both of those buckets, or just what's next for you in general?
Yeah, man, that's a big question, Alex. That you just threw my way, man. Um, Chick-fil-A provides me an environment to really foster everything that I really am passionate about. And I have been extremely grateful for that. And it's given me a platform to be able to maximize the elevated leadership group as well. Because when you're developing and implementing all of your processes and systems within Chick-fil-A, right? That it draws attention, right? It raises some eyebrows. So I am very grateful for that. Honestly, like I want to take that, and I would love, my mission would be to take that very same culture and feel to businesses all across communities. I figure that people are working what, like a third of their life is spent at their workplace, right? I mean, just a massive amount of time is at their workplace. If we can transform the workplaces that people are functioning and working in, it really has the ability to transform them as an individual. If you can transform them as an individual and improve and lighten them up and sharpen them, then they're going to take that into their homes. That could then influence people's homes. It could impact homes in a positive way, and ultimately all the way to communities. I know this sounds crazy big, but I genuinely believe that just leadership development within a business can create this ripple of improvement, of joy, of internal satisfaction that can ultimately impact communities. I would love to be able to impact multiple communities across the nation simply by working with executives and senior to mid level leaders so that it starts the ripple effect. I feel like it's the first domino. If we can hit that one, it's going to be great. So for me, I guess that means ultimately maybe expanding far beyond, just one Chick-fil-A. But, I guess I'm on the journey right now. So I'm starting off. And if I'm able to continue to doing that, that would be my passion. And that's ultimately what I foresee.
No, man, you gotta take it one step at a time, and I think you're really speaking to my heart when you say that. Like, and I know I said we was closing up, but I gotta add on to that. But
Yeah, go for it.
it's one of those things where you have to have vision beyond your four walls, to create
Mm-hmm.
impact that goes like, I heard a vision statement for Chick-fil-A a long time ago, and their vision statement was to be the brightest light in the community. And I felt like
Mm,
that was so big because whether we realize it or not, our actions as a business impacts communities, right? But then
absolutely.
what happens when the individuals in that business get passionate about taking that same culture, that same
Mm-hmm.
feeling beyond those walls? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
know I know that the competitive, the business mind would say, well, we want to keep all this here. We want to keep all of
Mm-hmm.
our mojo in house. But our communities would be better if everybody adopted the mindsets that we have,
Yeah, absolutely.
and our cities will become more appealing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
everything around us will start to just grow. If more
Mm-hmm.
people had the idea to prioritize culture and kindness and care and all these things that we've been talking about, that's and I know, one man or one entity can't change the world, but if collectively in our own
Mm-hmm.
spheres of influence we all work towards making that happen, I think we can make some serious headway in trying to to create something different and to create something new. So man, no, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Peter. Actually, I probably would love to revisit this conversation at a later
Mhm.
date. As both of our businesses continue to grow and to flourish, I'm kind of speaking that over us as we continue to just
I like it.
impact our communities. I'm sure there'll be more opportunities for us to have an intersection that's like this. And so I would love to continue to stay up with you. Speaking of that, how can people contact you? How can they get in contact with you, Peter? And how can they interact with Elevated Leadership?
Yeah, I have a web. You can go to my website. It's going to give you all the information. It's going to clarify a lot of the things we've talked about. It's elevatedleadershipgroup.com. A lot of my content is produced through LinkedIn, so you could look up Peter Lopez III on LinkedIn. And so those are going to be two primary areas that you can go to contact me. And on those, it'll have my contact information, my email. So absolutely, very personable, individual based. So feel free to reach out if there's literally anything I can do to be a help. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. That's my passion.
Awesome. Well, there you guys have it. I think today was a masterclass on what it takes to not only operate and grow a great workplace, but also look into yourself to see what attributes you should be prioritizing as a leader. Thank you so much, Peter, for taking out some time out of your busy day. And sharing with our audience. Hopefully, I can return the favor if the opportunity ever presents itself. I would love to do so. That's all we have today, TPE. And until next time, peace.
Tap into the Pivot Experience where we help young, hungry entrepreneurs move on to the next step.